All right.
Can you guys hear us? Now we're good.
Now we're good.
So just in case you guys didn't know, this right here is Barry Mathis. This is my much shorter, younger brother, better looking brother. But actually, Barry is a specialist in working with investors. So I had asked him to come in and speak to all of you guys out there in Zoom world, as well as us here in class, talking about working with investors. So take it away, my friend.
Awesome. And are you recording?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for having me. We're gonna a mix of people. We've got people in the room, we've got people online. If you have any questions, I believe there's a way you can put them up in the chat, and Kelly is here in the room and she'll be able to pass those along, and feel free to just raise a hand, Kelly, if there's ever a question, and I'll stop and talk about it. So I just wanted to kind of join through this. This is kind of my fun spot. This is what I like to do, is work with investors. There's a couple of different ways that we can do it. I see some of you guys are moving around. I may go too fast. I may throw too many numbers at you. You may be bored out of your mind, but I don't know. So if that's something that you want to come back to, we'll have the recording available for you to come back to. There will be things on, I know everybody always says that, we'll get you the slides or we've got the recording, and then you never do it. You never go back and look at the slides or look at the recording. You will not get what I'm going to talk about today unless you come back and go through it on your own time. There's no way you're going to grasp these concepts that fast unless you already know them, and you need to know them. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. We will be able to do questions throughout it, and if there's anything you don't understand, feel free to slow me down or stop. Okay. Without the feedback of your face in the room, it's hard for me to tell whether you need something. So make sure you use that chat box and get a hold of Kelly, the moderator, and she'll get this thing going for us. Okay, so I want to first talk about why you work with investors. I don't think this is a big mystery right now. You know, we just had a real estate market that, even though the prices haven't corrected, the sales volume has gone down roughly 20%. And 30% in some areas. I would say out west, it might be closer to 30%. That means no matter what you are doing, you're going to have to work a third harder in order to get the same number of deals going out the door. That means that some real estate agents listening to the sound of my voice are no longer going to be here in 3 months. And that's okay. That's the way the cycle is supposed to work. But if you're wanting to say, no, I am not going to lose my business, I'm not going to stop taking in the same number of deals that I was doing before just because the public isn't buying, then figuring out how to work with investors is a very good thing. What if you could add 20, 30% to your business just by picking up this asset class of working with a different type of buyer? Okay, so that's kind of the concept. There's also a little more to it. The reason I've always loved it is I want you to think about how a normal business does. I know you've got FedEx background, right? Or UPS? FedEx background. With Gary, I've always admired his, I go to him with the tough questions a lot, but they have something called customer acquisition cost. And if you watch Shark Tank, they're always talking about this number. They're always throwing it around. What does it take to get you a new customer? Well, we figure somewhere between 15 and 20% of revenue is probably the number that you spend on getting a new customer. If you're an agent out there doing about 12 deals a year, you make about $180,000 before all your splits. That's going to be about $3,000 a deal in order to get a new customer. Now that customer will buy 3 to 4 homes over the year. So if you've got 3 homes over there, then you're wanting to get a 15 times return on your money that you invested for your customer acquisition costs. Everybody follow that so far? So you spent $3,000 to get that customer. Over the life of the customer, you'll probably make $45,000. That's your 15 times return. Okay. So when you work with a landlord, these are people who the 2 different type of investors: buy and hold and fix and flip. When you're working with that buy and hold investor, otherwise known as a landlord, they probably are going to buy about 3 rental properties. Well, if that increases your number, if you get that one person to do that 3 times, plus they got the 3 that they'll regularly sell as your client, now you've got a 30 times return on that investment. Cost you the same amount of money to get that client, and then you get a better return on the investment. The average flipper will flip 3 deals a year if they're active and doing it. If they do more than that, they're probably really moving into a company. You're not going to see the average flipper really hit 3, even more like 2 to 3, but in order to make my pitch worked out, it worked out really good to be 100 times. So, all right. So 100 times revenue. If you do that, that ROI is a key number. If you don't know what that means return on investment. So you spent your $3,000, but this time you picked up a client that's going to do multiple transactions. I know you guys are all familiar with Roxanne. Roxanne built an entire career on one client, I think, maybe two. And so she's done much more real estate than that, but a lot of her business came from those one or two strong clients. And that's what we want from you. We want you to have to not go recreate the wheel every time you need to sell somebody a house. The average tenure of a person in a property right now that's going to live there has gone up to about 8 years. Well, you need to have more clients than just one, or you need clients that buy more often than just that time. If you could get a couple investors in there. So what's different about working with investors? Okay, so we're going to jump right into this. We're going to go from selling to teaching. So there are going to be investors that know more than you do about real estate. They've already bought 50 properties. I have one client who owns 43 properties. You're not really going to teach him a whole lot about how to buy investment property. He kind of has got that down, right? But you're going to also have clients who need to be encouraged to go buy their first investment property, or in many cases, maybe keep their property instead of selling it and becoming a landlord. So in those cases, you need to switch from the role of selling to the role of teaching. And it's a very different role. I'm going to not go over every aspect on the slide, understanding that you guys can come back and read the slides, because I believe that there's some things in this presentation that you really need to focus on. I only have a short amount of time, so I'm going to kick through them. You need to come back through these slides, okay? They're self-explanatory. I've never really enjoyed people that just read their slides. All right, so we're in that teaching mode. When we come into the teaching mode, we have certain goals, and those goals are mostly met by asking better questions. I want you to get from the mindset of you're telling someone and selling them of what they're doing to you're going to teach them. And the only way you can do that is to understand them and what their goals are. So if I say, what are your goals? So I've got a couple people in the room. Let me get some names going around here. Cheryl, Rodney, Kelly, Perry, and Larry. And so, all right. So, Rodney, what are your goals? So I'm going to put you in the role of an investor. What are your goals right now? And go ahead and answer me like you'd like to be an investor. What are your goals?
Build a portfolio, have more homes so I can rent them out. So it'd be to stay rather than buy and flip.
Okay. So you like that idea of buy and hold property. So you've got a residual income coming in all the time, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So how many properties do you own now?
One.
Is that the house you live in? Awesome. What's your time frame of when you'd like to have a good portfolio built up? How many years?
10 years.
So in 10 years, you'd like to have a good portfolio. What have you done in the past to invest? Have you ever invested in stock markets or insurance companies, anything like that?
Stock market.
In the stock market? Awesome. Awesome. And are you currently invested in the stock market?
Yeah.
Maybe a 401k?
A little bit of everything.
Okay, so a little bit of tax deferred money and a little bit of non-tax deferred money.
Correct.
On that non-tax deferred money, what kind of return are you getting?
Oh man, this last year, I think it was less than 5%.
Awesome. Well, that's really good because the S&P went down 20%. So if you got less than 5, you did really good. All right. And currently right now, what resources do you have to start investing with? Do you have a little bit of money saved up, a lot, 10, 20,000?
Quite a bit.
Okay. Do you have more than 100,000 saved up? Okay. So you could go out and purchase a property right now if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. What's stopping you from doing that?
Interest rates, I'm concerned with, maintaining, the house I currently have in state of California.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I heard quite a few things. I'm not going to dive into all of those things that I heard from him. There are some things that I would put him in a car here pretty soon. That's my direction, but that's who I am. But I'm not going to do that from this meeting because I need to finish the meeting. And so, all right. So, but you guys can understand exactly what I just did. I went through and did a mini interview with him. We would call this a buyer consultation. It's really important when you have investors. Okay. And I'm going to dive into some of the reasons why, but that's what it looks like. And that's pretty much what it sounds like. Okay. So these questions are here. You can use all of these questions when you come back through on the recording. All right, so here are some sounds of energy vampires. So these energy vampires will suck your time and suck your energy. So one of the biggest things that's different than working with investors, than working with mom and pop that are going to live in a house, or a first-time home buyer that are going to be owner-occupied, is that those people have a really strong reason to have a house. They have to sleep somewhere at night. They don't, and they want to live in this property. An investor is doing just fine if he does nothing. He can leave his money in his bank account, leave it in the stock market, and do nothing. And that's a perfectly good option for most investors. Okay. So you have to really spend your time a little bit to understand whether you have an investor or if you have somebody that's just kicking tires. All right. So the sound of an energy vampire looks like, I've been looking for a year, but there's just no good deals out there. Well, I would dig in a little further. What do they define as a good deal? Are they looking for pie in the sky? Or are they just not recognizing the good deals when they're there? Because I can tell you, in most cases, people just don't recognize the good deal they're seeing. They're everywhere. I've had several agents looking for me. Obviously, I'm not going to spend much time on what that means, but you want to lock them in for some loyalty. I have access to unlimited funds. That's a favorite of mine. So unlimited funds means it's not their money and they don't have access to it. And so you need to dig in a little bit deeper. Also, the phrase, my partner and I, that's another good one. Clause and or sign. If you ever hear somebody talking about that clause, it means they just came out of a seminar. Find out what seminar they went to and start that line of conversation. And the term wholesaling. And so we'll go down some of those roads. But again, I just wanted you to understand those signs. You can always reach out to me here. I'm local in the area, 916-225-7777. I have no problem with you contacting me if you have any information on that. So where are we at right now? The average household has 279,000. So this is going to seem like I'm backstepping a little bit, and I am. I'm going back into his personal situation as an investor. By the way, this is the same pattern that a financial advisor would take you through. They'd understand who you are, what you want, what your risk level are. So this kind of gives you a little bit of a background on where people are on their savings. And these are some staggering numbers. 41% of 55 to 64-year-olds have no retirement savings. 52%, 65 to 74, have no retirement savings. I would say that's a little bit clouded, because I bet you that the people who came up with that number are actually financial people. And so the only thing they were counting as retirement is stocks. And a lot of people do have real estate that aren't included in those numbers. Okay. Rule of 25. I'm moving fast, guys. I know it because I'm trying to get through this part to some parts that I feel are going to change your business. Okay. But these conversations, I don't move fast when I'm talking to people. I slow them down and I walk through these slides with my clients. If I don't do it a slide, I do it on a napkin. I go through this presentation with my clients. How much money? Don't skip it is what I'm trying to say. Even though I'm going through it fast, don't skip it when you're doing that interview. Rule of 25 is how much money do you need in retirement? Well, whatever their annual income is, I probably want to multiply that by 25, and that's how much they need. In his case, that's what he needs in 10 years, right? So I'm going to assume that he's got 140,000 in the bank, and he's going to need to get to 2.4 in 10 years, okay? So that's that average investor, somewhere between 40 and 50 years old, owns their house. They have 96,000 a year in income, nest egg of 150, and they need to double that nest egg 4 times. 4 times is the magic number there, okay? Each one of those times, T1 stands for time, right? So we need to double that money 4 times so he has enough money in retirement, right? How do we determine what's going to double that money? Well, we use something called the rule of 72. And the rule of 72 says that if you divide the interest rate, you divide 72 into the interest rate, then it tells you how long it takes to double the money. So in this case, 10% will double your money in 7 years. Everybody with me? Simple concept, right? If you wanted to double your number slower, if you got a lower return, it'd double in 10 years if you had a 7% return, and it would double in 15% rate would double in 4.8 years. So what we already know is that we needed to double his money 4 times, and it takes 5 years to do it. So either he needs to get a 30% return so that he can do it in 10 years, or he needs to get an average of, it's going to take him 20 years to do it. You see how fast we got to that? It really cuts through all the crap. Now I've got to show him a way for him to get a 30% return, because his stock market's not giving him a 30% return. He doesn't even believe that he can get a 30% return safely. No one believes that. I'll show you how to do it. You guys with me?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you're with me. Give me a thumbs up. All right, good, good. All right. All right, so as we start looking at returns, we have to deal with some things called tax brackets and things like that. And so, guys, a lot of times this is agents talking to their people. They have no idea the financial footing that their people are on. They have no idea what their clients' tax returns are or how much they make a year. All they put on these blinders and they think that they're only looking for the house. They're only looking for this next deal. Well, that might work when you're doing mom and pop and somebody's going to live in the house, but it does not work at all if you're going to get into an investment advisory role. Okay, so for investors, I need to know what tax bracket they're in. The reason is there's some big differences in how we approach whether we're going to do fix and flip or buy and hold, and even how we do the fix and flip if we get there. Okay, so this is a pretty simple chart. I like this layout. I haven't really seen it before, but basically we are in a, I'll teach you a little bit about tax. If you don't know already, we're in a progressive tax system. So what this chart does a good job of indicating is that I'm going to stay on the left-hand side with the single people. Single people, single. What's that song? Single people, single. I don't know. Anyway, we'll skip it. We'll skip it. All right. So if you make less than $11,000, you're in that no tax bracket, I guess. And if you go up, your next group of money gets taxed at the next level. So up to 11 gets taxed at 10%. And then as everything above 11 and below 44 gets taxed at 12%. So you're 10 on the first amount of money, then 12 on the next amount of money. As you go from 44 to 93, that $50,000 there is getting taxed at 22%. So how this plays out in real life is most of your investors, remember I said they make about $96,000 a year. So they're already up in that 24% bracket. Any additional income you bring into them for that year gets taxed probably at the next bracket up. So that means a short-term capital gains, which is regular income. If you go out and you flip a house and you're already making $180,000, right? You go flip that house, all of that money that you're flipping comes in at 32% tax bracket. So your profit, you make $100,000, you lose $30,000 in taxes. So there are a lot of different things that we might do to keep that from happening, but you need to be able to understand that and have a rough idea of what's going on with your client. Does that make sense? All right. Oh, by the way, Governor Newsom, and he's not the only one that decided what our taxes are, but he's the face of the evil nation of California. And so why do I call them an evil nation? Is they don't care whether it was short term or long term. They're going to hit you for another percentage and some of the highest taxes in the country. And so that person there at the 90,000 mark has probably got another 9% worth of taxes coming on. So if you're tracking, if you're playing along at home, that's a 32 and 9. Yeah, that's a pretty big number. All right. So just remember these numbers. They're always in the back of the mind, even if you don't know. Now, what could we do to change that? Well, what if we did a fix and flip, but we held on to it for at least a year before we sold it? Well, in most cases, that would drop that 32% tax down to 20%. Okay. Maybe or maybe not affect your profit margin on that transaction. That's about all I'm going to spend on taxes, but I want you to understand how it relates to your client. Because I guarantee you, your client that has enough money to be doing investing, he's probably got a CPA or he's probably having these conversations with somebody. He's not doing investing without understanding the effects of tax on his investment. Okay. So real estate terminology 101, we're going to backstep a little bit. Here's a return on investment. Your total profit divided by the amount you invested. You always need to keep this number in mind. So this is what their true return on investment is. Pretty simple. $100 stock sells for 120. You made $20 profit without counting taxes. We're not going to account taxes on every one, but they are a part of it. So $20 divided by 100 is a 20% return on investment. Everybody good with that? Usually when you do returns, they're talked about in annual returns, even though sometimes you're getting them for the life of the project, which might only be, we usually will call that an internal rate of return. And that might be a 6-month project. So it's an internal rate of return would be doubled in order to get the return on investment if it was a 6-month project. And two common terms that you use to measure investments with, one is the gross rent multiplier, and the other is the inverse of that, which is a cap rate. So pretty much if you're getting income of $33 a month, sales price of 500 divided by the gross rent of 40,000 is a GRM of 12.5. Anything over 10 is pretty awesome in California and very hard to find. All right. Cap rate equals cap rate equals your net operating income divided by your sales price. That's just a fancy way of saying all the money that comes in after the expenses have gone out is your net operating income. Divide that by your sales price. Now, just point out here, there's one number that doesn't go into there, one expense that doesn't go into there, and that is your mortgage. So if you have a loan on it, that's not counted as part of the operating income in this case. So you got to make sure that you account for that. The reason that's so is so that you can, what we're measuring is the value of the investment. We're not measuring how much money you have to put down. How much money you put down changes any debt leverage ratio that's out there. You can make any property a good investment if you put enough money down on it, if you're going by that theory. Okay. So you're wanting to separate the financing from the property. Now, in real life, you have to bring that financing cost back in. So you have to make sure that every property is going to debt service, cover the mortgage in that case. Go ahead.
On a scenario like this, how much history do you need on those income before you can sell it at a cap rate like a net lease investment?
Well, data is only as good as the monkey that put the data in the system.
Right.
And so since real estate agents are the ones that put it in the system, those are some crazy monkeys, and those God knows what they'll put in there. So I would say you need to do your own due diligence. But I would try to have 2 years worth of data if I could to give you a real answer. But to answer your question on the buy side is I want enough data to make me feel comfortable that it's going to be that way next year.
It's real.
That it's real.
Yeah.
So what could throw that data off? Sometimes people will mix in a lot of repair cost in that data that might not be a recurring expense. So usually the recurring expenses are what we're wanting to see in there. So if you replaced a roof on a property, that's more of a capital expenditure than a recurring maintenance. And so I'm really concerned more about recurring maintenance in this than I am capital expenditure.
And then the projected incomes coming from a tenant. And the strength of that tenant is to determine what that 6% cap rate is, if it's 6 or 7 or 5.
No, the cap rate won't vary based on the strength. What might vary is based on whether you think you're going to get that money or not. You might adjust, allow for a little loss up there on the income on that projected income, but the income numbers are what they are. You take the math that adds up for the rent they're currently getting and then divide it by the expenses. I think I'm divided by the sales price. The only thing I would say the most common mistake here is that people will use the operating expenses that includes the taxes as they currently are, rather than the taxes after they've been adjusted for your purchase. And I say that's the biggest problem. And then the others, you'll see something called a pro forma expenses. Pro forma just basically means they made that crap up, right? And depending on how conservative they were is whether those are numbers you can use. But I usually like to get actuals, and then kind of in my back of my mind, I'm planning on what I could do to the property to increase that. If I increase the income and decrease the expenses, then I can raise my value by changing my cap rate. But I'm usually doing that as gravy on the transaction, not something that I'm calculating into the expense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great question.
Going back one slide.
I do. Go ahead. I don't. So you divide 40,000 into 500,000, and that gives you a gross rent multiplier of 12.5.
Okay.
It's just a quicker way of doing it instead of having to get into the operating expenses. And so you get comfortable with either one.
Okay. So I know you went over this really fast and we need
That's
to
good.
watch this again. So, but what is the significance of the 12.5?
So what it's doing is it's letting me measure. So so it's not that significant if you're just looking at this one deal, right? But what I'm doing is I'm looking as an agent, I'm looking at 100 properties. And I'm trying to figure out which one has potential for me to look further, right? So if I look at 100 properties and I do the simple math, right? You could drop a spreadsheet out of MLS, right? And it can give you the rent and it can give you the sales asking price. And if I just divide those two, come up with a GRM, everything that's above the average GRM, I'll go look at, and everything below the average GRM, I might not even look at it. Does that make sense? So this is a rule, what they call a rule of thumb, right? But we know that rule of thumbs, are only things to get you there, right? They just get you to look closer. Same thing with a cap rate. I happen to know on duplexes, all of my duplexes, I'm going to pull about 2.5% off of the gross cap. And that 2.5% is going to represent what the expenses would be. And so that's going to let me look at 1,000 duplexes and kind of figure out which ones are good. But I just know for that asset class, 2.5% of a gross cap rate is going to give me a net cap rate, or pretty close to it. Does that make sense? So I do that to screen a lot of properties. Okay. And by the way, the gross cap rate for every quarter, I do an index on the local Sacramento duplexes. And our gross cap rate right now is right around 6.73 minus your 2.5 gives you a 4 something, which is not that great. So
People are buying them.
people are buying them. Yep. They need them. Yep. As fast as they can.
If you have 2 years of history on Airbnbs, can you sell those as a net lease investment, or is the income too volatile?
Well, you're using a term that's much more sophisticated than most Airbnbs, net lease investment. You can attempt to sell anything you want, however you want. Whether there's an industry that recognizes Airbnb as a triple net is a different conversation, because they really don't. Can you make money doing Airbnb? Absolutely. But you're going to sell to someone who wants to run a business, not someone that wants to buy a triple net. A triple net buyer is typically what that means is triple net, all your expenses are being paid for by the property, the tenant, not the owner. Those type of buyers specifically do not want to run a business. So I don't think they would ever buy an Airbnb, because the whole reason they're looking for triple net is so they don't have to even pay taxes. Right. So it's kind of a misnomer. All right. So now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. This was our warm up. We're 30 minutes in. And so now we're warming up. Are we doing good? Are you guys getting some values out of this?
Yes.
All right. All right. So here we go. I've done this one in 7 minutes, but I'm going to slow it down for you. So, all right. Cash flow, the path to wealth. This is the 5 returns on investment. These are the returns on investments. Most people understand 1, 2, or 3 of them. Very few people actually get all 5 of them. And when you understand all 5, I'm going to take you back to your 30% investment return. All right. Which is what you need to get in order to double your money and be where you need to be in 10 years versus in 20 years, right? So see how I've made it really personal for Rodney? Okay, good. I've made it really personal for Rodney, except forgetting his name. But I had to do that. First, I had to know who he was and what he wanted. And then after I know who he was and what he wanted, then at that point, I know how I can sell to him. I can't sell to him effectively until I know who he is and what he wants. And then I have to start learning to use the language that he's used to using. I triggered on what has he already done? Well, I know he's done some investments. I know he's looked at his statements. And so now I start to know some of the languages that I can use. So we're going to start in real quick on the cash flow from the rents. These are some semi-made up properties from probably a year or so ago, but this math actually works. And these were actually valid deals at the time that I did this. I think it was last year. Net operating income minus debt service equals cash flow. So on this one, we are going to count that debt service. $500K with 20% down is $2,500 principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That number has changed, by the way, because when these were done, we were down in the 4s and 5s. I'd have to go through and rerun my numbers to see what rate was used for that PITI. Everybody understands that PITI means principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Okay, so this number would probably be higher, but we're just going to run through it anyway. Rent or revenue equals $3,000 a month. 500 times 12, that's your cash flow, right? Your payments, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance was $2,500. Your rent was $3,000, so you have $500 a month cash flow. $500 a month cash flow is going to give you $6,000 a year. Now, what did you invest in order to get the $6,000? You put 20% down, which was $100,000. So your $6,000 divided by your 100,000 gives you a 6% return on investment. Pretty simple, yep. Right? So now we're going to move to the next one. And by the way, if we did adjust that for a 6% rate instead of a 4% rate, we would probably drop it down to a 2% return on investment. All right, so if you've never seen an amortization chart, this is what one looks like. As you can see here, the green is the principal and the yellow is the interest, right? So how much of your payment goes towards interest in the beginning, which is over on the left-hand side, versus how much goes towards principal, which is over on the right-hand side. So this is how the 30-year mortgage thing works, right? And so as you look at that, your balance is falling on the right in the red line, okay? So this is one of those times when when you want down and to the right instead of up and to the left. All right, so here we go. So $500,000 minus $100,000 is a $400,000 loan. Principal and interest is going to be about $2,000. The principal is going to be $2,000 a month. That's your payment. Principal and interest. Your principal is only making up $600 of that, and your interest is making up $1,400. 600 times 12 is 7,200 being paid down every year. Who's that being paid down by? It's being paid down by the tenant, right? And so when that tenant is paying that your money down, then you're getting that return on that money. So you're getting $7,200 a year on that money, and that's $100,000 is what it costs to get that. So now you got another 7.2% return on investment. Everybody understand? All right. So as we change the interest rate, we also need to remember that we change the we also change the rental rate as well, so that offset each other. Go ahead.
Sorry, I think Cheryl had a question.
I think he was gonna talk about that. Now you're going into interest, right? You're going into interest rate.
I'm going into the deduction. Do you mind closing that, Kelly? Thank you. I think I'm bothering them.
It would depend on what you're paying for your interest, right?
Yes, your cash flow will depend on your interest rate. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So your return, your cash flow will depend on your interest rate, and so will how much debt they're paying down. All of that will depend on the rate that you're getting. Okay. All right. So 500,000 minus 100 is 400,000. Now we're going to talk about expense, your return on investment from expense deductions. Now you get to write off the expense of that interest. It is a business expense. You also get to write off the expense from the property tax and the insurance, plus any other expenses that you have. So those expenses come in and they hit your tax bracket. So this, remember going back to the tax bracket, why we needed to know what tax bracket you were in. So if this person is in the 24% tax bracket, let's total up all those expenses, $22,800 for the year, multiply that times their tax bracket. Now they're getting to deduct $5,472 is the value of the expense. If their tax bracket was 32%, then it would increase the value of the expense. So remember how it says it takes money to make money? Well, the more money you have, the more taxes you're paying, the more this expense value comes back to you when you're doing a real estate investment. All right. So there's another 5% return. Now we're going to get into the two that people don't quite understand. Even a lot of real estate agents don't quite get it. This is value from depreciation. So the powers that be at the IRS decided many, many moons ago that all properties are worth zero after their lifespan, their assigned lifespan. Now we happen to know that's not true because we've got Victorians in East Sac that are not worth zero, right? And they were built 100 years ago. Now, what we do is we take, if it's a residential property, it has a 27.5-year lifespan. And if it's a commercial property, it has a 39-year lifespan. So we take the 500,000 that they used to buy the property. We're going to back out the land value of that 500,000, leaving us with 20%. Roughly 20% is the land value in most cases. So now that's going to be about $400,000. This 400,000 divided by 27.5 is 14,545. Multiply that times their tax bracket, and you got another $3,400 deduction value. Everybody understand? Mm-hmm. All right. And here we go from appreciation. And this is the all transaction houses index for Sacramento Roseville since the beginning of time. Not the beginning of time. I'll have to squint really good to get that number. Actually, I think that's only 1990, if I remember my recessions correctly. 80. Is that 80 or 90? 80? Okay, 1980. So starting after 1980, we went up. Those gray lines, I think, are recessions. And you can see how it ran up, ran down, and then is running back up, and now probably has tipped over the line and is starting to come back down some, although not as much as you might think. Values have actually not gone too much down very much. It's the number of transactions that have dropped dramatically. Okay. So, so whatever number you assign as your rate of return. So up until recently, we were probably using 6%. It got crazy, went up to 18%, 15%, whatever number you feel comfortable and your client feels comfortable using as an appreciation number. it doesn't really matter if your client is conservative and says 4, 5, or 6, right? So what would you use as an appreciation number, Rodney?
I like 5.
You like 5. Okay, so if it's 5, then it's going to be 25,000 instead of 30,000. All right. And then we're going to go 25,000 divided by 100,000. Or in this case, I'm doing the math. You got a 30% return on investment. You would have a 25% return on investment. Okay. So that number, it doesn't matter that much because, I mean, it does, but they're probably going to pick a reasonable number. 4, 5, or 6 is usually reasonable. Unreasonable is what we saw in 2021, 2022. Those numbers were unreasonable. Okay. Now, so let's jump into our cash flow. We're stacking up our money now. We got this big stack of money because he needs to get to what number? Rodney, how much money do you need? 2.4 million, right? In order for Rodney to get to 2.4 million, I got to have a big stack of cash. And so he's getting a 6% return on his cash flow, and he's getting a 7% return on his debt pay down. He's getting deductions that are worth a 5% return and depreciation worth another 3% return. And then he's getting, so that's all adding up to 22% before we even talked about appreciation. And now his appreciation, he doesn't like my 30%. He thinks only 25%. I'm totally fine with that. Now he's going to get, instead of a 50% plus return, you're going to get something closer to 40, So in either case, he's still able to get there from where he wants to go. Does everybody see that? See how I walked him right through that? This is where you need to be. This is where you want to be. This is how you can get there. Okay. So that's a very common plan. None of those numbers were really inflated. I don't think. You've invested some. Do you think that I got to those all fairly?
That's accurate.
All right. So did you think, Rodney, before you came in the room today that you could get a 30% return on your money?
No.
Does it make you want to go buy a house?
Yes.
Awesome.
I know.
Hey, Barry. Barry,
Awesome. So there are a lot of different ways you can get there. Now we're going to jump into some fun stuff, and I'm going to keep rolling through this. I'll come back for questions at the end on that, but I'm going to roll through some of these fun things because this is the more fun part, and we got to keep you awake now, right? So, okay, house hacking. You know what? Any of your kids could probably do this, right? Go co-sign with your kid, get an FHA loan, put him in there, let him get 4 roommates and start building his future. I've actually taught this at grade school, and those kids are like, yes, let's do it. Let's do it, right? And they're, in high school coming out wanting to do it. Some of my buddies have done this exact program with their kids. If you're an adult and you have some extra money, I'm not talking to people who are barely making it by. That's not what I'm talking about. That's too dangerous. What I'm talking about is the person that's probably sending their kid off to college, probably, they've got enough money. They're set. So, I mean, we understand that we work with investors. If you're making $200,000 a year, you can probably afford to help your kid buy a house, right? So I'm not talking to the single mom that's barely trying to make it, right? So out here, if you're trying to buy a house, if you're going to send that kid off to college, make him buy a house there. Right? Make him take care of it. Make him rent it out. Make him be responsible for it. That's part of his income. That's part of maybe he gets his cash flow at college from that house, right? I bet he's got to take care of it if that's what he's living on. So there are some things you can do. Actually, I'll go back to that single mom. I'd love to see single moms getting their kids involved. It's getting tough to do it, but you can do it. I just bought a house recently for $100,000 in California. And so you can do it. Right. So, okay. Owner occupied duplex, non-owner occupied co-borrower, get 1 to 4 units, get these gift funds, co-signers, however you need to do to get into it. And then let that math start working for you. All of that math, if you're getting a 40% return on your money, let's go back to that 30% return on your money. You double your return in 2 to 3 years. Okay. Here's another way you can juice this thing. Airbnb. This is a site that I'd like to use. If you are considering using Airbnb, I highly recommend you get a lobotomy, but no, I highly recommend that you go to AirDNA. They're a great website that will teach you a lot about what's realistic and what to expect in the area that you're wanting to look in. And that's kind of like pouring nitrous oxide into the gas tank. $300 a night times 150 nights really does pay the bills. Be glad to talk with you on that if you want. I don't currently manage any Airbnb. I have started managing some midterm rentals, and they're doing very well. These are midterm rentals that we'll use for traveling nurses, people selling their house, people coming in for a short term. They are, what's nice about them is you don't have the regulations around Airbnb that have popped up a lot. So I would say that's the biggest hurdle now. If you're going to buy an Airbnb potential property, is make sure you fully understand the regulations for that particular property, or you will get caught out. And if you do get caught out, call me. We'll turn it into a midterm rental if it's a good property. All right. And which way do you go? So there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate. Primarily what I've been talking about up till now is just buy and hold. You might wind up doing something called a BRRRR. If you don't know what a BRRRR is, you need to listen to Bigger Pockets more often. And a BRRRR is a buy, rehab, rent, refinance. Yeah, I think that's it. Buy, rehab, rent, and refinance, right? Great property. It's a way that you buy the property, you fix it up, you put a tenant into it. By that time, you're letting your 1 year go by. Now you've dropped from long-term to short-term, from short-term to long-term capital gains. And then you can get a refinance, get a lot of your money back out of it, and either hold the property or sell it and do it again. All right. I wouldn't refinance if you're going to sell it and do it again. All right. Which role do you play? If you're jumping into the fix and flip market, now you've got a job. Right. So I think that's the biggest thing that people don't understand about fix and flip, and even about buy and hold unless you hire a property manager. The reason I get paid as a property manager is I'm doing the job of managing the property. And so I think that gets confusing a lot. There is no passive income in real estate. All right. The passive income is only, there are a couple of ways to get passive income. I shouldn't have said none. Triple net is one of them. That's a great way. Property renting single families and other families when you have management in place is a great way to do it. You don't have to spend your time as much as you do some money, but somebody's got to do that job. The property doesn't manage itself. The same thing is true, and a lot of people don't understand this. Steve and Gary, you guys have a ton of experience in this. And this is true. Which role will you play? Are you going to be the investor? Are you going to be the project manager? Are you going to be the contractor, the labor? Are you going to be some part of all three of that? And so you got to figure that out, and everybody involved needs to have a job. All right. So here's the formula for fix and flip. We're going to jump right into this. And remember, you can come back to this, and I've got the slides for you. After repaired value, 30 minus 30% equals your purchase price. This is a standard rule of thumb. Can you take it down to 20% on higher properties? Yeah. Could you do 25? Yeah. But it starts to get tight. There's not a lot of room for mistakes at those numbers, right? So what I mean by that is, if I've got a $500,000 house that I got a house that I think I can sell for $500,000. Stay with me here. I start with the after repaired value. I just had one of my agents that wants to do an investment send me a property. Barry, what do you think about this? I replied back, what do you think a great house in great shape in that neighborhood would sell for? Boom. I start with that number, right? From that number, now I've got to take out all my expenses. Cost of sale, repair costs, holding costs, financing costs, and then whatever profit I want to make for putting money out on the street and putting my time and energy into it. So you start with after repair and then back down the number. All right. And then how do I determine the after repair value? I've got a whole thing on YouTube. If you want to go on there, I think it's called, John, can you put the link? John, are you on here? John, I think you're on here. You're probably muted, but can you put the link to the how to do a CMA? Find that video and put the link in the chat box for me.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to assume John heard me. All right.
Yes.
John, do you think John's on that?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Thank you. All right. So I don't think we can hear you because we're in the other system. But anyway, so put that link in there if you can. That'll tell you how to do a CMA. Doing a CMA for a property like this for a fix and flip is a little bit different in the fact that I have to make up in my mind what the house is going to look like. Normally I go out and see a house. When I'm doing a fix and flip after repaired value, I'm trying to figure that out. It's pretty much a comp. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, what will this look like in the future? Either I have to know what I'm going to do to it, or I have to know, in many cases, my clients, I know what they do to houses. And so when I know what they do with houses, you could go look at another house that flipper did. That would give you a good idea of what he's going to do, most likely. Or you just get an idea of what you're going to do. I can tell you this. In my houses that I'm flipping, I do not like you to be able to walk in and tell what was flipped and what wasn't flipped. If you can tell that I did this, but I didn't do that, then I probably pulled short for some reason. There are some reasons to pull short, but that's kind of your goal, okay? You probably want it to look like a Marriott. And what do I mean by that? Marriott usually keeps a pretty trendy look. And so you kind of good if you go a little bit like a Marriott. That's one of the things I use. I like a masculine viewpoint on my houses. I don't know why, but I do. Probably because I'm a guy. All right. So you want properties that are similar in size, adjust for lots over a quarter acre, adjust for pools and age of the home and the condition of the comps. Now, here's the thing that's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to take the average of the 3 or 4 top properties in that area that have sold for the most per square foot. And then I'm going to add about 10% onto that if those properties weren't flipped. If those properties are just standard, I'm putting a bonus on top of it because I know that mine's going to look great. Okay. Mine's going to be better than theirs because everything in mine is brand new. All right. And here's the thing. People don't, this is the biggest problem I see with fix and flippers that are first time fix and flippers is that they're not allowing for that. They're being so conservative that they never get a deal. Or they're being so conservative that they don't put enough money into the property to really resell it. Right. And people will pay you if you make it nicer. If yours is nicer than everybody else, if you build in some wow factor, there's somebody out there that wants that house that's nicer than every other house on the street. And they don't even know how to express it. They just walk in and they go, I got to have it. Because they've been looking at crap all day. Their real estate agent took them out and showed them 7 properties in the same neighborhood that were a similar price, but all of them were ugly. And they had the shag carpet and they hadn't had it fixed up. And they walked into yours and you got the bling bling going on. Right. All right. Now we'll have some fun. We'll just walk through a few properties. This is kind of my ice cream on the cake. It's a little dessert for you. So here's one of the properties we did in Lincoln. This is right over in a tough little section of Old Roseville. We did it in Roseville on Lincoln Street. And so this is just an idea of what we'll do to a property. You might not be able to see this very well, but here on the left-hand side, you can see what the existing floor plan was. I really like to get a handle on my existing floor plan and what the numbers are, the measurements and things like that, because then I can bring it in and model it and turn it into something different. And in this case, we were able to take this 2-bedroom and turn it into a 3-bedroom, nice master suite inside the same square footage. It's always a lot cheaper if I can stay within the footprint. This is a program called floorplanner.com. If you like using it, if you like staying awake at night, and hey, let's face it, we probably all watch too much Game of Thrones. And so this probably makes you money where Game of Thrones doesn't. Might even get you a divorce. Take half. Here we go. This one's kind of fun. This is one of my favorite little creations. I know this is not fancy. You can't really tell what it is. But if you go inside what used to be a closet, on the right-hand side, it had a HVAC closet that was facing out into that room. And so we took out the HVAC and I was able to put in a bath in a normal size closet. So I got a shower, I got the sink, and to the left of that door, there's actually a toilet sitting there. So in a normal closet, I kicked out the right side and was able to make it into, now I took a 3-1 and made it into a 3-2. By the way, that is the #1 investment you can make, is taking a 3-1 into a 3-2. Normally you'll do a 3-1 into a 4-2. Because normally the way you do it is you put it outside the envelope of the house, which always is a little bit more expensive. As I mentioned, you can tell this one is a really clean shot, outside, inside. This was after repaired value was 37% higher than what we purchased the property for. So when we sold it, that's what we got. You can see it just really cleaned up good. Don't be afraid to use really bold colors. Look how the flowers made a big difference, took out some yard. You're never going to get that grass to green up, so you just take it on out. And then those bold colors really mattered on this house. On the inside, we took what was this guest room, this little add-on section back there that looked kind of dumpy. And we just really redid everything, left everything open. And that doesn't cost as much as you might think. And so we're using the existing floor plan. Always get rid of those box lights, throw in the can lights. I think can lights right now probably cost you $125 a piece installed. And so that's something you should always consider doing. Here's one of my own personal houses. You never know where you're going to get the flip from, but when you're out there getting flips, let's say that you're getting a deal and you only think you have that 20% or 25% margin. It's actually okay. Because while you're out doing that work and you're not going to make a lot of money, you might not make money on your first deal, but you're out there doing it. And then someone knocks on your door. That's what happened with this one, and told me specifically, she said, my daughter's in this house. She's got a drug crazed boyfriend and I don't want to be the one to evict them. Will you buy the house so you can evict them instead of I can evict them? And I said, sure, I'll evict your daughter. No problem. So I bought the house. I evicted the daughter. I kicked everybody out. I gutted it and turned it into this. And I turned around and sold it and made a great little number there. You can see that I made a 76% markup on it. So that was great, right? These are simple little units that I highly recommend these units. People sometimes ask me, should I do a condo? I'd much rather you break even on $100,000 property than break even on a $700,000 property. Because if you break even on a $700,000 property, there's a good chance you'll lose money on that $700,000. So do a couple of small deals before you stretch for the moon and do your first flip in Granite Bay. By the way, guys, while we're on the subject of Granite Bay and in this one in North Highlands, it's a completely different set of contractors. That's one thing people don't understand is you can't use the same contractor that used in North Highlands for Granite Bay. Because if you're using him in North Highlands, he costs too much to make a profit. And if you use him in Granite Bay and you got him from North Highlands, he probably doesn't know how to do the finish work on this bigger property. Okay. So you got to have those teams, everybody you have in place. So you build a filter for each client. I've got to come back to Rodney. I'm coming back to Rodney. Rodney, I've got to understand what it is you want, why you want it, what's driving you to do it. And then I build a filter across all the properties that are available in the MLS. I have thousands of property to choose from. Even at this moment, I have probably 4,000 properties to choose from, even with our tight inventory. And I could go in here today and find Rodney a great deal in the MLS every day. I just need to look for it, right? I need to look for it. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to find out what his parameters were. I'm going to go find the 6 or 7 properties that best fit those parameters. I'm going to drive out to those and see which ones are good. And 2 or 3 of those, I'm going to make an offer on. And based on my offer is based on what his needs are in order to make it work. Okay. Everybody understand? Because he doesn't have to buy. He only buys if I find something that fits his needs. Okay. So the right toolbox, this is your toolbox, understanding how to do that client interview, getting your market data and really understanding it, building out some screening tools. Here's one of my tools right here. I export it out to Excel. I filter it by the asset class, whether they're looking for doubles or quads, or they all have each class property has its own advantages. And I figure out what my baseline is, what's going to be good, I don't even want to look at it because it's never going to make any sense for my buyer, right? I'll do the same thing on fix and flip. I just kind of look at what these areas are selling for, what I think I can get them for, what my estimated repair cost is. I can tell you right off the top of my head, almost every 3-bedroom, 2-bath in town, I can do that house for $45,000, right? So after you do it for a while, you stop kind of having to figure out what your costs are exactly, although you do need to know them eventually. All right. So I do have a place you can go take a course on this, certifiedinvestmentexpert.com. It goes a little slower. At the end of it, you get a certificate that you're a certified investment expert. So that's something you can do, certifiedinvestmentexpert.com. And that's that. Let me give you some websites. Investopedia is great. Keeping Current Matters is great. Housing Wire. If you're not listening to Sacramento or checking out Sacramento appraisalblog.com, then you're crazy. That's really one of the best ones. Bigger Pockets is great too. That's probably a podcast you should listen to all the time. Is Bigger Pockets podcast. They'll give you such a breadth of knowledge on different types of investing. Tom Ferry will help you stay positive and some sales techniques out there that are good. All right. 49 slides in 52 minutes. I was a little bit over. And so let me ask what kind of questions you have. I know I went through a lot of stuff. Any questions? Too much stuff to have questions about? Well, guys, I really appreciate the opportunity that you let me come and speak to you. I started up a property management company in October. We were blessed to be able to get a jump start on a company, and we have 120 doors now. And so if you're out there, if you know somebody that's wanting to do some investing, let us take that peace of mind and give it to them. Let them bring it over to us. Bring it to me before there's problems. I solve a lot of people's problems, but I'd rather get involved before the problems start. And so I'd love to help you and your clients anyway. One of the things that we do that's a little bit different is our contracts with the management agreement say that if they're going to sell their property during the time that we have that management agreement, then we get first right of refusal to sell that property, and we bring that back to you as the person who made that referral. And so we lock that in right there, and we'll make sure that those people are taken care of by you. Every time we get a referral, it goes in, it logs the agent that sent it to us, and we know the tag on that database always has that agent there. Okay. Any other questions?
What percentage are you for
Management, we're 6% management fee and 50% of the first month's rent. So 6% is ongoing, and then 50% of the first month's rent. We do a little bit different. I'm doing some midterm. Those are a 10% rate. If I was doing Airbnb, it'd probably be a 20% rate. So it runs a bit higher on Airbnb because of the intense labor involved.
So Barry, did you say that you reserve the right to resell it?
Yeah, so would they,
Going back, so the property, you're gonna, reserve the right to resell it instead of-
you're going to get the right to resell it. If you give me a property, I give you the right to resell it.
Okay.
Right. So, but we do it contractually that it has to come back to us so they don't get their cousin, brother, sister. And then it comes back to you. And if you tell me to release that right, then I'll release it. But it always comes back to the agent who referred it to me. Okay. Any other questions? All right.
You're awesome, buddy. We appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys. And thanks for my team on here. Thanks, Colleen. Give a shout out to the virtual assistants that are working it and really help me keep everything running. John and Ron and Colleen, thank you guys.